So, a long time ago, even before my YouTube channel existed, I had a student ask me during a private lesson what else I did besides teach guitar in order to make a living doing music. And I told her that I did quite a bit of studio work for people, but I also played live. And she got really excited. Her eyes got really big, and she's like, "You play on stage? Like you play concerts?" She's like, "You must be really rich." And I kind of laughed and she looked a little bit confused. So I wanted to dedicate this video to her because in this video, I'm going to talk about what musicians really make, at least in my situation, when they played live shows. And a long time ago, my friend John, who's kind of in the financial world for his job, he loaned me a book called Your Money or Your Life. And it was a really interesting book, actually. And in it, it talked about something called your real hourly wage. You know how you think of a number when you think of how much you make per hour, but that's not really what you make because if you factor in all the other things, it changes that number. For example, if you work 1 hour and you make 20 bucks on that hour, you would think I make 20 bucks an hour. But what about the maybe half hour it takes to get to your job and then you work and then you come back home? That's actually 2 hours that your job is taking up in your life. So now you're actually only making $10 per hour. It's actually kind of shocking when you see what you really make at your job if you consider all those other things. So I thought I would do that calculation, but with one of my gigs, one of my more recent gigs actually. And so my last gig was a couple of days ago, but I actually started preparing a week before the gig. And what I do for that is I start to think about what I'm going to need for the show. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to need a capo. I need to make the set list because the band asked me to pick my 15 favorite songs. Realized that I also needed brand new guitar strings because I ran out. And I always change my strings before every show. So I jumped online and I ordered 2 packs of strings. I thought, okay, they'll be here in plenty of time. A few days go by and now we're 3 days out and the strings still hadn't shown up. But I was still cool about it. I'm like, you know what? Even if they show up the day before the show, I could put them on and break them in time. It should be just fine. But 3 days out, what I typically do is I start to run through the songs. I go home and I usually practice on the couch with my laptop and I run through the songs a couple times. And I really try to do some detail work where I listen to the solos and I try to remember them note for note as well as I can. Since I fill in for this band, the songs aren't cemented in my brain really. So I always have to go through and sort of relearn certain parts just to reacclimate myself to it. So another day goes by. Now we're 2 days out and the strings still haven't shown up. I'm still not panicking though. But what I like to do is something called an equipment check. So I like to set everything up and make sure everything's working. I was playing a couple other shows with other bands, so I had to redo my pedal board, do the settings for them, and then make sure that my pedal switcher had all the songs in it in order. Well, when I went to play, I found out that it wasn't working. 2 of the cables that ran to my pedal switcher actually went bad. So I had to take some time and construct the cables because they're kind of specialty cables that I make from this Boss pack. It's kind of a long story, but that took some time. Now we're at a day before the show. And those dang strings still haven't shown up. So I have to make an emergency run to Guitar Center. And luckily they had the right kind of strings that I use, which are kind of rare sometimes, 9.5 gauge. So I bought 2 packs and I brought them here and I put them on the 2 guitars. After that, I went on my stage and I set up my monitors and I played all the songs through with my iPhone 2 times through. And then I go back and I fix any mistakes and go through any details just like I did a few days before that. But now they're really getting cemented in my head. Now I pack up all my gear, take down everything that I set up, and I put it nicely by the door just so that the next day I could just pull up, load up my truck, and go to the show. I like to make things as streamlined as possible. So the day of the show, I wake up and I found out that the strings arrived. Really bad timing, but it didn't matter. I will always use those later, so it's cool. So I drive to the studio, load up my truck, drive down to the gig, but this is only 5 p.m. because we have to do a sound check. So I show up at 5:30, unload all the gear, set it up on the stage, we do our sound checks, and then we don't even play till 11 p.m. So there's a huge gap in time that I could either stay there and just hang out or I could go home. And I decided to go home because I still had to get ready. So I had to shower, I had to put on my stage clothes and all that kind of stuff. So I went home, did all that kind of stuff, drove all the way back, waited around for about an hour and a half because I like to show up early just in case. All 3 bands that played before us stuck to their set times really well, so that was really cool. So we went on right at 11 p.m., played for about an hour. And then afterwards, you have to take all your stuff down. And usually this takes longer than setting up initially because, people come up to you and they want to talk and, you're just chatting with your bandmates and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more of a relaxed process. Once everything's torn down and packed up, you got to bring it to the truck and then drive it home. And then I usually drop it off at my studio and set it up that night. But it was getting pretty late, so I actually decided just to leave everything just laying on the floor for the next day. Now you have to factor in the expenses that go into playing a show. So gas, for example, going back and forth that many times is about $10. I'm just sort of guesstimating here. Parking my truck on the city street costs about $10. The 2 packs of strings equaled $15. And then I also had a couple drinks at the show and bought some for my friends, so that's $20. Now, it might seem funny to factor that in because I didn't have to have those, but it's just a natural part of playing a show. You just sip on something, you're socializing. There's some stuff that, you have to factor in because of that. Okay, now the fun yet depressing part. I'm going to calculate all this together. So if you took all the time it took to prepare, to play, and all the after show stuff, it comes to 13 hours, which is pretty surprising if you think about it. To play a 1-hour show, it took me 13 hours of time. So we have 13 hours, and we ended up getting paid about $82 a piece. They give us a huge lump sum. We had to divide that 4 ways for the 4 bands. And then within each band, you have to divide it between band members. So I ended up with $82. So if you divide 82 by the amount of hours, 13, you come up with a pretty surprising figure. But the expenses have to be factored in as well. So let's take the 82, take away the 10 for the gas, take away 10 for the parking, 15 for the strings, and 20 for the drinks, and you get $27. Now we could divide that by 13 hours. I made $2 an hour. Pretty crazy, right? Some people might be like, well, you can't factor in the drinks because you chose to have those. That's true. But if I refactor that, I end up with $3.60, which is still about $1 less than minimum wage was when I was a kid and I got my first job. In order to make what minimum wage is around today, I would have had to make about $200. Now, here's some good news. Some shows I do get paid that much, and every once in a while, you'll have like the one-off corporate show where you'll make a lot more, and those are nice to get every once in a while. But typically, it's around $100 that I make, and by the way, that hasn't changed over decades now. It seems to be a constant throughout all these years. Whenever you play live locally, you make about $100. So it becomes really clear that most of us local musicians play for the love of music. Some people get a little depressed when they hear that because they're like, man, I really want to make a living playing live. Is it possible to do that? If I dedicated my whole professional life to playing live, I could pull it off. What I would have to do is I wouldn't be able to do my YouTube stuff as much because all my focus would be on playing live. I would have to join a band that paid at the mid to higher levels and then that played all the time, every weekend minimum. I would also have to increase my margins, I'm talking like the book now, by not having those drinks, and maybe just drinking water, carpooling, doing anything I can to save money on that kind of stuff. And another benefit of playing a lot is that you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to remember the songs anymore. So all those hours I put into practicing, I could wipe those off the slate because they'll already be in my head from playing so much. So if I were to do all those things, I could make a living playing live, or I could take another route and just join an established original band that's already touring and maybe get on some sort of salary with them or something like that. I have friends that do that. And even though it's not really for me, it's great that it's always a potential option for me if I needed it. So I hope this video is really insightful for people who are wondering what people get paid when they play shows. I know when I was younger, I thought, oh, you just pack up, go to the show, play, have fun, make a bunch of money, and come home. And when I learned the reality of it, it was quite shocking. So yeah, this video was very fun, but also kind of depressing to make. But, all in all, it's great to have some insight on what really goes on, especially in something as crazy as the music world. So hopefully it was fun to watch, and we'll catch you all at the next video, which should be coming out in a couple days. Thank you. Bye-bye.